Yeah, I'm not going to do the crystal ball thing, so no forecasts. What I want to share this afternoon is my vision for the city of Columbus. And I'm going to start by benchmarking. Sorry, I know we do a lot of benchmarking in the city. Right, we've got to build Silicon Valley here, right? If they have a downtown arena, we need a downtown arena. We've got to have the research triangle here. What are they doing in Austin? What's going on in Portland? Why can't we be like Indianapolis? You know, we've got to do a little bit of benchmarking, but I think we benchmark ourselves to death in this city. I don't think we pay enough attention to all the great things that we already have here. That said, I'm going to do a little bit of benchmarking. Because benchmarking means you're sort of, you're setting, who are the cities that we aspire to be. I'm going to suggest, though, that the city that we should aspire to be is not Austin, Texas, and certainly not Indianapolis, Indiana, but Renaissance Florence. Let's think about this. Here's a little history lesson. Think about what happened at that city, which was smaller than Columbus, I want to say, at its height. This was the city that gave us all those innovations in engineering, in the sciences, in the arts. This was the city of Da Vinci. This was the city of Brunelleschi. This is the sort of city that I think we can aspire to be. All the innovations and all the creativity and all the ideas that that city generated. There's an awful lot of conversation now about how to create creative cities, how to create centers of innovation. Barton Kunstler says that certain cities are hothouses. He named Florence as one of those cities. A hothouse, you know, like a greenhouse, right? It's a space, a place that allows plants to nurture and grow. A hothouse for cities is one that allows ideas to nurture and grow. That's what I think we can create here in this city. We already have a lot of these elements in place, and I think this only just barely scratches the surface of what we have in this city. I look at all the researchers that we have at Patel and at the universities. I look at the scholars and poets and writers and artists and dancers at the universities. I look what's happening here at CCAD. I look what's happening at the Columbus Museum of Art. They just started their new creativity center over there. I look at COSI. I'm really jazzed about Wonderland. I love SparkSpace. I love the Advanced Computing Center for the Arts and Design over at on West Campus, TEDxColumbus. I love Jenny's Ice Cream. I love the Surly Girl. Look at all the creative and innovative things we already do in this city. So what I'm going to suggest that we do when we leave here this afternoon is find a way to mash them up all together. And that's what's going to create our hothouse. That's what's going to turn Columbus into the creativity and innovation city. Now, we don't have to do that by collaboration. We don't need to collaborate with each other. We can do that. That'd be nice. I'd love to see what happens when we have the director of public health for our city and two artists. What happens when they get together? What sort of things can they produce when they collaborate? But we can also encourage what I call creative proximity. Creative proximity. And what that means is this. You and I might work on different things. You might be an artist, I might be a software engineer, let's say. And we don't have to collaborate in order to create something new and inventive and creative. In fact, you could be doing what you ordinarily do in your domain, painting or writing code, whatever that might be. But me watching you or observing you or talking with you about what it is you're doing gives me ideas that maybe I could use over here in my domain. In fact, Megan, I think, is someone that's well-positioned to do something just like that. And vice versa. Whatever I'm doing here in my domain, you might find of interest over in your domain, something you never thought of before. Lots of creativity experts tell us this is the way new ideas get born and developed, by this kind of what I call domain bridging, moving ideas back and forth between different disciplines. I hope you recognize Miles Davis up here. And I'm going to give you just a very simple, brief example from Miles Davis about what I mean by domain hopping or domain bridging. He says in his autobiography that he got ideas for phrasing the trumpet by listening to Orson Welles and Frank Sinatra, an actor and a singer, to get ideas for how to phrase the trumpet. That's what I mean by domain bridging. That's how you get these new and innovative ideas in jazz, by looking outside your domain. So what happens if we start bringing together people from different domains, our creatives and our innovators and our people that are interested in ideas here? To do that, we're going to need to identify our translators. Now, a translator, of course, is someone who speaks two or more languages and is able to move back and forth between those languages. And we need lots of those people, for sure. But for me, translators are also those that are able to move back and forth between different domains, like the sciences and the arts and history. We have a lot of translators, I think, in the city. In fact, my guess is that a lot of us in this room are translators, are comfortable in lots of domains, and are very good at bridging those domains and bringing together people from different kinds of domains. Ruth very much comes to mind. Adam Brulette over at Wonderland. Chuck Palmer, I know, is in the audience. Christian Long. I mean, I could spend the rest of my time listing names of all the translators in this audience. We're a city full of translators, and I think one of the first things we should do is find a way to gather together our translators. That's the way that we'll create this hothouse effect, this hothouse of a city of creativity. I was at a meeting yesterday at COSI. There were folks from COSI, folks from the Columbus Museum of Art. There were folks from Wonderland. Christian was there. Artie Isaac, maybe our leading creativity guru in the city, were sitting there. And we were just talking about the sorts of things that are going on in each one of those areas. And at one stage, I think it was Kim Keel from COSI said, you know, this is just such a fantastic conversation. I wish we could do this sort of thing all the time. And I said, well, sure, you could go to TED tomorrow, and we'll have that kind of conversation. Or maybe we could set up something where we have those kinds of conversations, those kinds of contacts all the time. And in doing so, it would not just be something we do once a year in the fall, as good as this is. It's something that we would do all the time such that it becomes part of the fabric of the city, what it means to live in the city of Columbus. I'm talking about a mashup. I'm talking about a mashup, not of songs or videos like you'd see on YouTube or something, but a mashup of people. A mashup of people who hadn't thought of themselves as engaged in the same enterprise before. Of connecting that software designer and someone who works at the medical center and someone who's an executive chef someplace. That we're all engaged, whether we realize it or not, in the same activity, which is innovation and creativity. And bringing all those folks together in one physical location, not just a virtual location. Bringing everyone together in a physical location is the way that we can create and grow new ideas in the city. When I talk about innovation, when we talk about innovation, and by we, I mean collectively as a society, when we talk about innovation today, we tend to be talking about technology or something that's commercializable. The iPad is an innovation, right? And it is certainly an innovation, but I take a much broader view of what innovation means. To me, innovations are actionable ideas, and those can occur in any kind of domain. So for instance, we could do something interesting and curious like this. This was very innovative, a very innovative way to think about presentations. We could innovate poverty. We could innovate homelessness and come up with solutions here in Columbus, Ohio. Can you imagine a greater innovation? Certainly more innovative than the iPod, I would think. Remember, Renaissance Florence was the city that gave us one-point perspective. A new way to view the world. I can't think of a greater innovation in the history of Western civilization. Maybe Columbus becomes the place where we develop a new way of looking at the world. We have these innovators, we have these creatives here already. Again, they don't always realize that they're engaged in the same kind of activity. We call right brain innovators creative. We call left brain creatives innovators. But to me, they're all part of the same process. They're all part of the same activity. And getting those folks to realize that what they're engaged in is idea creation makes the city that much stronger. You want to talk about a mashup? Take plain vanilla ice cream and add spices, and what you get is Jenny's. I can't think of anything more creative or innovative that's come out of this city. I've been struggling now for about 2 years to figure out, A, how do we do this? How do we connect these connectors? And the sort of name that we give it. And what I finally settled on is what I'm calling universitas, which is a Latin word. It's the word from which we get the word university. And it just simply meant a community of scholars. That was the original connotation of the word. I like the word to mean something like a space or a gathering that we do all the time, a space for perpetual gathering, a universitas. I know it sounds an awful lot like a university, and I want to come back to that. But I want to create a space. What I envision is a space that connects all the connectors in the city, that assembles all the translators, that brings our software engineers and our musicians and our dancers and our executive chefs together in one location to talk about, to think about, to nurture innovation. Assemble the translators. Ideas, creativity, innovation requires a physical space. We need sites for innovation and creativity. These are all examples of sites of creativity. A kitchen, the dance floor, the artist's studio, the laboratory, the artist's sketchbook, the medical center, back of the envelope. These are all sites of innovation. And what I'm imagining for Universitas is a space that mashes these all up together. What happens when we take the artist's studio and mash it up with the executive chef's kitchen? What happens when we take the laboratory and mash it up with the dancer's stage or the artist's notebook in the back of the envelope? That's the sort of thing I want to try to create here. Where am I going with this? We already have a university in this town, Dave. It's pretty big. You ought to know. You work for it. But Universitas is not the same thing as a university. This gathering I'm talking about is not, although it may look like it, it's not the same thing. Because first of all, it won't include just academics, people that are cut off from the real world. It has to bring together, it has to bring together people that are engaged in the world and people who lead a contemplative life as well. I don't want to denigrate academics too much. But it has to bring in entrepreneurs, it has to bring in academics, it has to bring in community activists. We all have to be a part of this. As you can imagine, unlike a university, Universitas won't have disciplines or silos, right? So when we get together, the artists aren't over here together, and the software engineers over there, and the people who work in the restaurant industry are over here. The idea is that we're all communicating, we're all talking with one another in this space. There are no students. There are no teachers. Well, actually, everybody's a student. Everybody's a teacher when we get together in one of these locations. It's sort of like what's happening here, I think. It won't be top-down. It won't be organized like in a hierarchy. There won't be a Gordon Gee type. Sorry. There'll be someone like Ruth, for instance. Curators. Maybe an assemblage of the translators, the people that are going to curate this space. And finally, what will make it different is there won't be anything like a curriculum, because a curriculum takes planning. And in fact, what I've noticed is that if you want innovation and creativity and new ideas to occur, you tend, generally speaking, not to find it in organizations as we usually think of them. Not in schools, not in businesses, not in other kinds of organizations. It's very hard. We need new kinds of organizations, places like Wonderland, for example, to think differently about innovation. The biggest reason why I think it's so difficult to innovate in most organizations is that you have to budget for it somehow. You have to plan for it. You have to imagine ahead. And innovation is very hard in schools, metro school notwithstanding. Very hard in schools. How are we going to teach this for the test? How are we going to know what to test when you're not talking about answers, you're talking about possibilities? That's the main feature, I think, of this space I'm thinking about, is serendipity. I don't know what'll happen when I put together an executive chef and a software designer in the same space. I don't know what results from that creative proximity. We were talking last night at dinner. We didn't know what was going to happen when Teresa was giving her talk and the artists were going to go ahead and compose behind her. We had no idea what the result was going to be. Fortunately, the result was outstanding. But that's part of what serendipity means. It's part of how the innovative process works. We don't know what the result is. We might fail spectacularly. Or, as I think is oftentimes the case, when you mix up and mash up together all these opposites, the results can be combustible. I'm talking about fostering conversations across domains. I'm calling it Universitas right now. I'm not wedded to that name. Someone suggested to me the other day, it sounds like you're talking about a salon, like those 18th century salons that brought together, all philosophers and literary types and artists and musicians. So maybe it is a salon. Maybe we're creating something like a citywide salon. At that meeting yesterday at COSI, someone, I think it was Christian Long, said, we have a chamber of commerce in this city. What we really need is a chamber of creativity. I really like the sound of that. The Columbus Chamber of Creativity, the Columbus Board of Innovation. Maybe that's what we need to create. So I'd like to suggest that everyone in this room could be a part of that larger conversation. The fact that you're here at TED signals that you're already sort of interested in this kind of thinking. In my whiteboard that's out there, if you're interested in pursuing this, I would love to be able to contact you. So if you wanted to give me your email or some way to contact you, I'd love to be able to talk with you and about creating this kind of creative space here. Because I think once we build this chamber of creativity, whatever we want to call it, I think what will end up happening is that we're going to become the benchmark city. We'll become the city that other cities will want to aspire to, because we have now rebranded Columbus as the city of creativity. Thank you.